guys, and welcome back to my YouTube. So today I am going to do a big deep dive into basically my current training. I am currently in a big off-season / building phase, and I trained legs the other day and I filmed my session, I filmed all my clips. So I'm basically going to do a deep dive and show you exactly what my training is looking like now and the reason that I am basically training the way I am. Because if you have watched the previous video, you'll see I had surgery back in May. So from sort of May really up until, I didn't get back training until the middle of August. And then it took me a couple of months to like rebuild my core strength because I had a cut through like my, basically like a C-section cut. It took me a couple of months to get back into training. And then we're basically going through the process of building things up. So I've been back to training now around properly really, I would say the past 2 months. So the plan is to essentially run a building phase through the back end of this year into like next year, and then run a little diet, potentially a prep, we'll see what things are looking like from May. So it's essentially a big, solid, structured off-season building phase all through the back end of the year into next year. So I want to make sure I am sharing this and basically sharing how I'm training, how I'm eating, and what it looks like as a female to go through the process of trying to build as much muscle as possible, which is exactly what I am trying to do at the minute. And honestly, if you are a female wanting to build muscle, your training is the #1 thing that is going to drive your progress. And obviously, yes, your food is going to play a part, making sure you're eating enough, your recovery, things like that, your supplements. But like the biggest thing when it comes to building muscle as a female is your training has to be very, very good. You have to be training hard. You have to be training properly. That's like the key driver of progress to build muscle. So I am going to walk you through exactly what one of my current leg sessions is looking like, and also just some of the key things when it comes to focusing on training, the things that I'm focusing on, the things that I really push myself and make sure that I do session to session to get the best results possible. So not just going into the gym, picking up a weight, doing exactly the same weight for 3 years and getting a bit of a sweat on, but actually training properly with like a really, really good intensity to pack some muscle on, or as much as possible anyway. So as I said, I'm in a building phase right now. It's a big, long ass building phase. And I really feel like I am so on it at the minute with my training, with my food, with my supplements, with everything. I really want to give this building phase like 110% and make sure that the next time I diet down, like I really look back at this phase and I'm like, yeah, I really put everything into that. So I am going to walk you through exactly how I'm structuring my sessions, how I'm progressing, and exactly what I'm doing to smash this building phase. So I'm going to pop some of my clips from the other day, from Saturday's session, into this video. So you can basically see what my session is looking like, what my training is looking like. But one of the first things really that I wanted to touch on is like sessions staying the same. So I have been doing these sessions now for a long time. So I got a new training plan just after I competed in, it must have been like early 2024, because the back end of 2023, after I did my last season, my training plan didn't change. And then we basically went into 2024 with like a new training plan. So I've been on this training plan now, bearing in mind I did have 12 weeks off training this year, since the start of 2024, and it's now nearly the end of 2025. So this is like coming up to 2 years on the same training plan. And I guess that's really the first point that I wanted to cover, is like when you are in a building phase, it is going to feel really repetitive and really slow and really monotonous at times when you are going through this phase. And I definitely still have days like this, but sometimes you can feel like not a lot is really changing, and you're going to the gym, you're training hard, you're eating your meals, but your physique isn't really changing that much. But that is honestly really, really normal in a building phase, because what we're looking at when we're in the building phase is the training progress, and that's not necessarily reflected until you diet down much later down the line. So I think one of the biggest things when it comes to your progress and knowing that you're making progress is you need to keep your sessions the same. And like, I go into the gym and I have run the same split now for quite a long time, the same sessions, the same movement patterns, and they haven't changed for a really, really long time. So this session, I will put some clips now of like the full session, so you can get a little insight into what my full session looks like. But I'm currently running a upper lower pull push leg split. So I train on the same 5 days every week. I have Wednesday and Sunday as my 2 rest days, and I train the same day, same split, same exercises. I have 2 rotations for my pull push legs. So I have like pull push legs A and pull push legs B, and then the same upper and lower. They're very, very similar, the rotations. So it's essentially exactly the same movements going through the week as a whole. And like I said, them movements haven't changed. So it can feel quite repetitive and it can feel quite like monotonous sometimes, but that is a part of building muscle, is that you need to keep the movements the same and you need to basically get really, really good at the movements. So better form, you know, really, really good tempo, nice and controlled, good connection with the muscle, but also actually just getting good and getting strong at doing the same movements. And one of the biggest things I would say also in a building phase, and this is what I'm doing at the minute, is make sure you logbook in your sessions. So every time I go into the gym, I have my little logbook, I write my sessions down, I track my sessions, I look back at what I did the previous time, and I'm essentially trying to beat those numbers, the reps, the weight, slow down the tempo a little bit. Sometimes I will actually add little notes on my lifts to be like, keep this weight, but actually you need to slow it down a bit. And this is where like filming your sets can come in so handy as well, because you can look back, you know, send your videos your coach, and you can check that kind of what you're doing is along the right sort of lines. So that's something that I have been really, really good at since I got back into the gym following my surgery, and I've been training properly. I've been like so on it with logbooking my sessions and essentially writing down all my numbers and tracking all my lifts and just rinse and repeat through this build phase. And sometimes, you know, I will look at this phase and think, God, like it's November. I've been in this phase now. I had all of 2024 in a building phase. And we did a little mini cut at the start of this year. So like start of 2025 was like a tidy up from sort of January through to, I'm gonna say the end of April was like a mini cut. So I got a bit leaner, and then obviously ended up having surgery in May. I was actually meant to be prepping then. That obviously didn't happen. And then we have gone back into a building phase. So I did all of 2024, and I'll have done like basically another, well, from August, I don't really count August because I was still recovering. So let's say October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. So this will be like another 8 months in this building phase as well. And sometimes it can feel quite monotonous. I know I get halfway through a building phase and I'm like, yeah, I'm just kind of ticking over, doing the same thing now. But I guess it's just important, like I still have to remind myself, this is where the progress is made from, like that rinse and repeat, show up, like make sure everything is being done on point, and you know, stick with that phase, because building muscle as a female does really, really take time, and I, you know, have to even remind myself of that sometimes. So the main thing, or one of the main things should I say, that I am focusing on at the minute is my training intensity. So really focusing on like training to failure and training to the point where I physically cannot lift any more weight. So I just wanted to, I guess, talk a little bit around what training to failure is and what it should look like and what it should feel like. And I think the biggest thing when it comes to training to failure is you still want your form, your tempo and your control to be really, really good. So it should still be controlled. There shouldn't be any bouncing around. It should be nice and slow still. You shouldn't be like, you know, swinging the weight around or anything like that. But it should be visibly a lot slower than the first rep. And that's a really good way as well to kind of check, is my training intensity right? Is your last rep, especially if you're like filming your set, your last rep should be visibly like loads slower than your first rep. And it's not about compromising the form or like swinging the weight around. It's about still focusing on the control, the tempo, the form, but just pushing to the point where you physically cannot move that weight whilst you are still maintaining good form. Like it should look and feel a lot harder. And that's a good indicator that you are essentially training to true failure. An interesting fact here is normally the brain, I think I was, I can't remember actually where I heard about this, but normally your brain basically stops you when you're only at about, I think it was like 60%, or it might even been less than that, than your true capacity. I can't remember what the exact number was now, so that's ruining this, but your brain actually stops you well before you actually hit failure. So you'll reach the point where you're like, oh my God, this feels really hard, it's hurting. Like your brain actually stops you and tells you you can't do anymore way before your muscle actually actually fails. So I think a really important thing in the building phase is like really focusing mentally on your set and like locking into your set, blocking out everything around you, and really like focusing on pushing through. So like when it starts to get hard and it starts to hurt and it starts to feel heavy, like really locking in, focusing and like pushing past that pain point, because then you will be able to like really dig, push past that point where it hurts and like really push and challenge yourself to the point where you physically like cannot move that weight anymore. And I really think like most people probably stop like a good 4 to 5 reps before they actually hit failure. So I guess the biggest way of being able to identify that is filming yourself. And like I will film myself a lot in the gym and I'll just look at my set and be like, actually, like it looks like I could have gone for another one there, even though it felt super hard. So I think just really like pushing that upper limit and genuinely asking yourself, like, am I truly training to failure on all of these working sets? Because that's one of the biggest things that is going to really drive training performance. And that's something that I've really been working up to since I had my surgery. I'm really working on nailing is pushing to the point of true failure. So something else that I will look out for in my training as well is, say I've got like 2 or 3 working sets. So most of the exercises in this session were mostly 2. There was a couple where there was 3 working sets. Is you should see a natural drop off as you go through your sets. So say for example that, you know, I had 3 working sets and my target, so let's take like the abductor for example. This was my second exercise in my leg session. I was doing 2 sets of 10 to 12. So I should be seeing a drop off from the first set to the second set. So if I'm able to hold the same weight and the same reps from my first set into my second set, it indicates that I probably didn't go to failure on the first set. So you should see a natural drop off because you are fatiguing that muscle, because you're pushing to failure. You then should not be able to perform the same reps and the same weight for that second set. So I should see, for example, my reps coming down, which it did from my first set into my second set, because I'm naturally fatigued from pushing to failure on that first set. So that's something like you can look out for, is when you are logging your sessions, are you seeing a drop off as you go through your sets? Are the numbers and are the reps naturally, obviously you don't want to do it on purpose, but are they naturally decreasing as you go through your sets? And that's a really good indicator that you are actually training to failure. So my first 2 exercises for my leg session, I did an abductor for 2 sets of 10 to 12, and then I did an adductor of 2 sets of 10 to 12. So these are in my one of my first, is it my first? So these are in my second leg session for the week. So I do my first leg session on a Tuesday and I do my second leg session on a Saturday, same days every single week. And then I do also have a little bit of like glute and ham focus work in my pull session, which is on a Thursday. So essentially I'm hitting my legs, I guess 3 times a week, but there's only a little bit in my Thursday session. And that is also one of the key things. Like one of my key areas I wanted to build up was my back. So like my back density and also my general like leg, I guess, size and density as well. So what we essentially did before, I was doing 4 sessions and I was hitting legs twice a week. And now we've gone up to sort of 3 times a week. And also I'm now hitting my back twice a week instead of once a week. So that's one of the key things if you're wanting to build a specific area, is the number of times you are training that muscle group. You want to basically train as frequently as you can whilst you're still recovering from training that muscle group. And that's something to think about, is like, that's going to be different for every person because your recovery capability is going to be very specific to you. So it's like figuring out what's the right volume for me, what volume can I recover from, and then how often can I train that muscle group while still recovering? And that's going to be very much personal, very much trial and error. Like for me, my volume was quite high and we actually had to pull my training volume down a bit because I was so sore after one of my leg sessions and I was still really sore when I came to train legs again. So we actually had to pull my leg volume down so I could recover to go like back into my leg session again. So that's something to think about, is your training frequency, how often you're hitting that muscle group, and your total volume. So how many like working sets are you doing on that muscle group and what can you recover from before you then hit that muscle group again. So once we've done the abductor and the adductor, we then went into 2 hamstring curl variations. So I did a prone hamstring curl for 2 sets, and then I did a standing single leg hamstring curl for 2 sets. And another note as well, when I'm going through my leg session, or any session actually, is I will always do at least 1, normally like 2 warm-up sets depending on the exercise. So these are essentially on top of my working sets to failure. So like all the rep ranges that I've put in this video, the warm-up sets are all on top of these, and they're not to failure. So I will basically choose like a super light weight to start with, just to like get used to the movement, make sure the machine is set up properly, like make sure that I've got a good connection with the muscle I'm trying to hit. And I will do a light warm-up set, normally around about 8 to 10 reps, and then I will go slightly heavier, normally about 50% of my working set weight, and I will do like 6 to 8 reps. If it's a bigger lift, like for example, I've got a leg press later in this session and I go quite heavy, I actually did 3 warm-up sets. So I did like 3 feeder sets before I went into my first working set. And it just means that, especially if you're going really heavy, you're like mentally and actually physically ready to go all in on that. You're not just going straight in on like a super heavy set without like going through that movement pattern initially. So I'll always do that with all of my sets as well. So one thing to note with this is not to fail, this is not to build fatigue, this is just to get a good connection with the muscle, to make sure it's set up properly and make sure you are ready to go into that first set to failure. So after the 2 hamstring variations, we then went into a B stance RDL. So this leg session is very glute and ham focused. There's a little bit of quads, which we'll be coming on to in a second, but I absolutely love this exercise. I think it's such a great exercise. A little tip, when you're doing anything where you are driving through your feet, so like a deadlift variation, a leg press, a hip thrust, anything where your feet are pushing into the ground, a squat, you want to do it either with no shoes on or with flat bottom shoes. It really allows you to think about driving your foot into the ground versus, you know, having like a really spongy shoe on. So that's a little tip as well. And I will always use wrist straps if I'm doing like a movement where I'm having to hold like a dumbbell movement on leg day or a barbell movement. I will always use wrist straps as well. So this again was 2 sets. I'll put the video in here. And something else to think about is, we spoke earlier about adding reps, adding weight, which is obviously something I'm really, really striving for, but there's a lot of other ways to also progress your training that aren't related to the weight and the reps. So what I will also focus on is looking at other ways that I can progress my training. So for example, form, like can I make my form better using the same weight so that I'm hitting the muscle more effectively? Because if I am improving my form and I'm hitting the muscle more effectively, that's going to be a better and bigger stimulus on the muscle. Another way is slowing down tempo. So rather than like really rushing through the reps and going really fast, thinking about keeping the movement super slow, or even making the movement slower. Like, can I make the movement a little bit slower? And that's going to mean that that muscle is contracted for longer. And if the muscle is contracted for longer, but the tempo, for example, the tempo is slower, but the weight and the reps are the same, then that muscle is going to be contracted for longer. That's still a stimulus for the muscle to grow and a slight progression. So another way is to get better control, because what will happen a lot, especially, for example, it's really easily done on things like a leg press, but just throwing the weight around, no control, you know, the weight is just like flailing all over the place. Whereas if you can really slow down the movement, like I just said, but also control the movement. So we want to think about when we're doing a movement, not you know, the weight not like bouncing around, actually having it nice and controlled. And that again, like if that muscle is constantly contracted and you're not using any momentum, you're not bouncing around. Like in the squat, are you bouncing from the bottom? That's going to be momentum. If you can slow that down and control that bottom part of the movement, so you're using your quads, you're using the glutes, you're not using the rebound, again, you're going to be hitting that muscle more effectively. So really thinking about your tempo, your form and execution, your control, and then the last thing is also your depth, making sure, I'll pop my leg press video in here to show you what I mean, but like when you're doing like a squat movement or a leg press movement, like are you getting the full range of motion, or are you just doing half a rep? Because again, if you're getting like on a leg press, for example, you want lots of like knee flexion, so you want a big bend at your knee. If you're only coming halfway down, you're not going to be hitting your quads half as effectively because there's nowhere near as much knee flexion. So for example, on a leg press, you want your foot position nice and low, you want your knees right right into your chest, and you want really good control at the bottom so you're not bouncing out the bottom of that movement. So we then went on to the final two exercises. So we've got a leg press and we've got a leg extension, and these were the two quad focus ones. I actually did my leg extension first, and this is, I guess, like a bit of a pre-fatigue before we go into the leg press, which is the final movement. The final two movements in this session were leg extension and leg press. I'll pop the videos in here. So a little bit of quad work to essentially wrap up the session. And the leg press was actually a drop set as well, where it's basically a way of intensifying the session a little bit more. So lovely little finisher there. And like I was saying at the start, I'm basically running 5 sessions a week at the minute. So I train Monday, Tuesday, I do my upper and my lower session. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday is pull, push and legs. And then Wednesday, Sunday are my rest days. And then I'm doing 2 lots of 20 minutes cardio, which I will do on a Monday and a Friday after 2 of my upper sessions. And then I also do abs on those days as well and on the Wednesday. So I just really like having set days. I know when I'm doing my cardio, I know when I'm doing my abs, it really helps me plan my days, and it really means that I get all my sessions done and I'm not trying to cram my sessions, my recovery is good, and everything just then ticks along really, really nicely. So my goals right now when it comes to my training are training with really, really good intensity and really, really good form, and really making sure I'm doing that across the board with every single set that I'm doing. Tracking everything I'm doing, tracking my sets, making little notes on my sessions so I know when I need to go a little bit heavier and if I need to work on like tempo or anything, and also making sure I'm eating in a consistent calorie surplus. So that's one of the biggest things, is once you've got the training nailed, actually eating in alignment with that. And I'll do another video and just show you like what I'm eating at the minute, what my food currently looks like. So my food has come up, I'm eating quite a lot of food at the minute, so I'll do a full day of eating and basically show you what I'm eating at the minute to also build muscle and go through this building phase as effectively as possible. But I guess one more thing when it comes to building muscle as well, and I used to really struggle with this because I came from like a very cardio heavy background, is when you are weight training and your intensity is like very, very good, you're not necessarily gonna feel like sweaty or like super out of breath, although I'm not gonna lie, after a big leg press set I definitely feel very out of breath, but it's more about like training the muscle to failure. It's a completely different feeling from like going into the gym and doing like a sweaty like spin or cardio session. The training intensity comes from pushing the muscle to true failure. So that's just something that took me a little bit of time, I guess, to like wrap my head around in a building phase. But when we actually look at overall what we should be seeing in a building phase, the biggest thing, and I know I touched on this a little bit at the start, but the biggest thing is the progress in the training, because you're not necessarily going to see that progress, because when you are obviously eating more, like you are going to gain a bit of body fat. Like I'm gaining a bit of body fat at the minute and I can feel that in myself a little bit. But the main thing I'm looking at is, am I getting stronger in the gym? Is my performance getting better? Am I recovering really well? Am I getting my meals in? And like, I know if I just stay really focused and like tick all those boxes off, I know that my results are gonna then be like reflective of that, even if I can't see it at the time. And that's just something to really think about as well, is the photos in a building phase aren't going to show a huge difference. It's more so like getting your head down, doing the work, looking at your training performance. And that's why like having a training log in a building phase can be so helpful, because you can actually kind of get a bit of, yeah, you know what, I am making progress because I can see those numbers going up in my logbook. And I also think like when you are training hard and when you're pushing yourself and you can see yourself getting stronger, I know it can be quite scary eating more and going through that process of like building up your food, but I'll do a whole new episode on this because I feel like this is a whole other topic. But when I am genuinely training really hard and I'm fueling myself properly and I'm eating like good quality food, like it doesn't mean that I look or feel worse as I gain weight. And I think that that's something that is so important as a female, because it's really easy to think if I do a building phase, I'm just going to gain loads of body fat and I'm going to feel really uncomfortable. And it really doesn't have to be the case if you do it properly and you do it in a structured way. Yeah, of course you're going to gain a bit of body fat, but you're going to reap so many rewards from doing this process. And this is what leads to, when you do diet down, if you put the work in and you eat enough food and yeah, you gain a bit of weight, like you ultimately need to do that to build muscle, because especially when you're in the earlier stages of your journey, like you need to get that muscle on, and that requires eating enough and training hard and gaining a little bit of weight. But you'll see girls that have like a lot of muscle and they stay pretty lean all the time, but they've already got the muscle there. But to actually get that muscle on in the first place, it requires like a good solid building phase where you probably are going to get a bit heavier. So that's just something to like realize if you are in the earlier stages of your journey, whether it be bodybuilding or just general muscle gain, like you probably are going to have to go through some phases of getting a bit heavier and, you know, gaining a bit of body fat to get the muscle on in the first place. So if all these things are happening, if you are getting strong in the gym, your form's good, your tempo is good, your control's good, your recovery is good, and you are eating to fuel your body properly, you will be making progress. It just isn't necessarily reflected at the time, which can be quite a tough thing to get your head around. So I hope this has been insightful. I hope it's been helpful seeing what one of my current sessions is looking like. And if there's like one thing to take from this, it would be like rinse and repeat, tick all the boxes and stick with it, because it's really easy in a building phase to want to chop and change all the time, worry that things aren't working. But honestly, like the best thing you can do, and I've learned this from going through multiple building phases, the best thing you can do is follow the plan, stick to your plan, tick the boxes, and really, really nail your training intensity. Like if you think building muscle comes down to giving your body the same constant message day in, day out, that's what it comes down to ultimately. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed a little insight into my training and essentially what this session looks like. So please do drop me a subscribe if you have enjoyed. Let me know if this has been helpful, and I will be back soon.